Program with Ted Rall and John Kiriakou. It is now bright and early, 9 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, even earlier where you are, John. Very early. It looks beautiful, though, out there in Paradise.
It's gorgeous. It's stunning. I'm looking at the Sea of Cortez right now. It's pretty great.
That's it.
Really.
I want to go diving there. That's where the whale sharks come, apparently.
In fact, we talked about that. They're in the area right now.
Oh,
yeah.
Apparently, there's nothing else to see when you dive there, but that's the one.
No, or do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and become mosquito food. It's Thursday, October 2nd. Thank you so much for joining us here on DeProgram. We're here Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. these days. That'll change later on, but that's where we're at these next few weeks. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for liking, following, sharing, subscribing, all the things to the show. They're incoming.
I've never seen so many mosquitoes in my life.
And it's dawn. Dawn's a bad time. Dawn and dusk and dawn. So yeah, horrible. Sorry, John, that you're suffering. Well, I guess that cues in nicely to our main story, but we'll have lots to talk about today. New poll shows that 30% of Americans think that violence might be necessary to fix the United States. So the mosquitoes believe in violence. So
yeah,
there we go. Government shutdown, no end in sight, started yesterday. It looks like both sides are digging in deep as we anticipated. We'll get into that. Supreme Court is at least temporarily and tentatively backing the independence of the Federal Reserve Bank. They're saying that Trump can't fire Lisa Cook just yet. Maybe not at all, but we'll find out what's going on there. Oh, interesting science story. Oh my God, John.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry for you.
There's one that's like trying to do me in right now.
No, I mean, I know. I remember when I was in Yucatan years and years ago, I stayed in this hotel where there was a hole in the bathroom window that went out to like an air shaft or something. It wasn't that big. It was probably the size of like a dime, but I could see them coming in through there like by the hundreds, and they were just eating my then wife and I alive. And we literally made our way. We had to take refuge in the pool like alligators, sort of like just basically with just our eyes above the surface, and then just going down and to drown the ones that were biting our. I got bitten under my nails. They bit my eyelids. I mean, they're crazy.
Ted, we've got an ad that we're going to lose. I'm sorry to say.
Oh, let's go ahead and do it.
Go ahead and do it.
All right. Still haven't tried 1775 coffee. Now it's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped. Only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard, the smooth medium roast, and the vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus. No crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin-free, and mold-free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. A frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear. It's yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Thank you so much, John, for the waking me up there.
Thank you.
Interesting science story as well. We've always known that women live longer. Now there's a really interesting theory, and what I love about it is that it's elegantly simple. Everything's complicated, like CRISPR and all this stuff. But this is a really kind of like, this could have been a 1960s science story. And basically where it seems like it really holds water to me. It's basically because women have an advantage by having two of the same chromosome, XX, and men have a disadvantage with their XY. We'll get into that. And then we have a request to talk about the Gaza aid flotilla being intercepted by the Israelis. And so off we go. Let's see. Okay. Love the early time, as XF says on YouTube. Thank you very much. John, what do you want to talk about first?
Well, let's start with the government shutdown, only because we talked about it yesterday, and you and I both agreed that this time just felt different. You're right, putting this on the screen right here. This is about Obamacare. The whole shutdown is about Obamacare, and very specifically, it's about subsidies about continuing for 3 months Obamacare subsidies for the poor.
Yes.
And that's why the Democrats think that this time, even though the Republicans are saying that this is a Democratic shutdown because a majority of the House wants a budget, the majority of the Senate wants a budget, the president said he would sign a budget, Democrats have stood in the way on the Senate side, so they've killed a vote on the budget. But the polls are showing that Americans understand that this is about Obamacare subsidies. And so far, and of course this could change in a matter of days, so far, a majority of Americans are siding with the Democrats. Now, I think that, frankly, is going to embolden Democrats to keep the shutdown going, which is going to hurt us in other areas. There was a piece in the Washington Post this morning, Ted, saying that, and this may be disingenuous, we can talk about this, but saying that this is going to hurt us because the cybersecurity agency, which is housed at NSA, has had to shut down. No, it hasn't. Every one of those people were declared essential employees. They're working. They're not going to get paid in 2 weeks, but they're working, and there is no drop off in cybersecurity protection. Also, oddly enough, both Democrats and Republicans have agreed to allow federal parks, national parks, to stay open, because apparently that pisses people off more than anything else when we have to close the national parks.
Yeah,
So
it does.
because nobody's really feeling any pain yet. We're only 2 days into this thing, and the Democrats think they're going to get more out of it than the Republicans will.
Yeah, I mean, the conventional wisdom, John, has been always that whichever party shuts down the government gets eaten alive. But I've been thinking about this since it started yesterday, and I'm thinking we may have been overlooking the issue of political branding. I mean, particularly under Trump, the Republican Party is no longer viewed as a sober conservative party. It's viewed as sort of petulant and manic and childish. Assuming the personality of the commander in chief. And I think so. Democrats look like the small c conservative party here, right? They look like they're trying to preserve something. Their narrative, I think, is going to land a little better than when Republicans, for example, deficit hawks have shut down the government before over spending increases. But I think this, nobody thinks of Trump or MAGA world as being conservative on the deficit. They've presided over record deficits. We have a $37 trillion national debt now, going up every fraction of a second as we talk. And so I think in terms of the branding, Democrats probably feel like this is the right play for them. And I think at least for the foreseeable future, they're probably right. And also, they will lose the Affordable Care Act entirely if these subsidies aren't returned, because there's no point to the whole thing. I mean, basically, the rates are the same as you could get on the open marketplace. Without the subsidies, there's no point to the ACA. So, and if people get used to not having those subsidies, they will leave the system entirely. They will no longer be in by next year. For Democrats, they can't not shut down the government.
Yeah, they have to. And that's their calculation as well. They also believe that if they remain unified, and the Democrats are far better at unity than the Republicans are, that they can keep this thing going as long as they need to, and that eventually Trump's going to have to give up.
And then, and the thing is, Democrats desperately need a win, and I don't see any other way they can get one. Like, this is the only battle that gives them a potential victory. Everything else is them just getting repeatedly rolled.
I agree with that. I think that's right.
What Sleepy Owl's asking, when Obamacare subsidies for the poor become bargaining chips in shutdown battles, does that deepen public fear of losing basic care, or does it risk fostering apathy where people stop believing? I don't think most people pay attention to this until something actually happens. I think people go ahead and they renew their insurance, and if they were to go and lose, and they were to lose it, if they lose their Medicaid, then they're going to start to dig, and they're going to look for a party to blame, and whoever messages best is going to win that battle. But right now, I think this is just sort of like infighting in Washington. Most people are working 60 hours a week and they don't pay much attention.
Yep. I think that's probably right, Ted.
Synagogue attack in Manchester. Sky, thanks for that reminder. That's right. Obviously, you have to think about Israel. You have to think about Gaza. I think you're just going to, obviously, anti-Semitic attacks have always been with us. That's not new, but you've got to assume that you're going to just see heightened frequency.
And remember, attackers are always going to go for the softest targets, always, right? Where the targets that are the least protected. I live in Arlington, Virginia. There's a synagogue near my house. And all that the authorities have done, well, there are two actually. All the authorities have done is to just park a police car in front of the one, and I mean just park it. There's no cop in it; it's just sitting there. And then for the other one, they haven't done anything. And the second is a Lubavitcher synagogue. They're followers of Rabbi Schneerson,
who looks exactly like Santa Claus.
Who looks very much like Santa Claus, yes, and there's nothing being done to protect that, nothing. So that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. Oh my God. The YouTube feed is going by so fast. I can't even keep track. Thanks everyone for watching though. It's like insane. It's like my old days at Bear Stearns watching the stock ticker, and holy cow. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there. By the way, I wrote my syndicated column this week about Israel. It's called Israel is Finished. And it's basically, I think, self-explanatory.
Well, let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
We talked, I guess it was beginning of this week, about the flotilla that was headed. I think they left from Marseille. I think it was either France or Spain, and they were escorted for part of that sailing by the Spanish Navy and the Italian Navy.
That's so awesome.
It's awesome, but the Israelis took them today, all but one boat. Israeli commandos stormed the boats, and
which they always do.
They've detained everybody, including my favorite person, yours, Greta Thunberg.
I love her.
Oh, I can't stand that girl. I feel like she's always yelling at me.
Well, she is, but I mean, look, the truth is, humanity. I wouldn't want to hang out with her, but humanity needs to be yelled at. I mean, we're fucking up big time. I mean, it's October 2nd, okay, here in New York City. Today is the first cool breeze I have felt since March. Okay, I mean, seriously, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
No, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You're right. You're right. It's wonderful that she's doing what she does, but I just feel like every time I see her on TV, she's looking right at me and she's yelling at me.
How dare you, John? How dare
you? To hell with you. To hell with all of you. It's like, shut up, little girl. Leave me alone. But anyway, the ship was intercepted just a couple of hours ago. And, well, all of the ships but one. It was a flotilla. And they're all being held now. In Israel.
Yeah. I mean,
unfortunately,
there's no legal basis really, right? I mean, those are Gazan waters that they enter. That's right. And I guess to the point that they occupy the land and they occupy their ocean rights too, and of course their controversial oil rights off the Gazan oil rights that everybody likes to talk about.
And that's going to be a big deal. And you're right. And people don't want to talk about that. There's a lot of money involved, potentially trillions of dollars involved, and nobody wants to talk about that.
Well, for oil, I mean, so literally, I went back and let me see if I can dig up this quote from Bibi Netanyahu. But he was literally just last week, and I alluded to this briefly. He literally said that I think I'd be doing it a disfavor not to quote it. Netanyahu gave a speech at the Israeli Finance Ministry, John. He said, Israel is in a sort of isolation. We will increasingly need to adapt to an economy with autarkic characteristics. Yeah. So if you're not a economics nerd, autarky is complete self-efficiency. So I did a little research for the piece, and I looked up regimes that have tried this.
Oh, right? Sweet.
Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, North Korea, Albania under Hoxha, and Kampuchea under Pol Pot. They all failed, by the way. And the countries that did the best were the ones with the most natural resources. Israel,
shocking, I say,
has almost no natural resources.
No.
However, if it were to annex Gaza and get those oil rights, it would have some natural resources, and it might be able to delude itself into thinking that it could survive autarkically. And also in the piece, I did a deep dive into, you and I both know, the Samson option, right? Which is this idea that Seymour Hersh wrote about in a book a while back in the 90s, talking about like Israel has this about 90 nuclear bombs. The idea that like rather than be destroyed, like Samson of the Old Testament, they would wreak vengeance and take others out with them, whether that's their Arab neighbors or it's the Palestinians or maybe us, who knows?
Right.
So like they do look increasingly desperate. I mean, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange tumbled 10 points on the 10 percentage points on the autarky comment.
Oh my God.
And then Netanyahu like rolled it back and said, "Oh, I didn't mean it." Yeah, he meant it. And he talked about like how Israel would have to become not like Sparta, but super Sparta in the same speech, and go it alone as a city state. Okay, Sparta traded with other cities.
Yeah, it did.
BB, by the way. So that's just not a good historical example if you're looking to ancient Greece for economic, lessons. But anyway, I don't know. I mean, I'm still haunted by what you said. I think the Samson thing is in the back of their mind. I think they know their backs are up against the wall. It's a problem.
Yeah. I'm genuinely afraid of it.
Me too.
It's not like you've got Jimmy Carter in the White House that can say, wait a minute, everybody, let's take this one step at a time and work out a deal. It's Donald Trump who just goes on Twitter and Truth Social and essentially parrots back what Bibi Netanyahu is saying. Very frightening. I'm genuinely worried about it. Let me add another thing about this oil. So the oil was only discovered recently, like in the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And very recently, in the last 2 years, the Israelis, the Greeks, and the Cypriots have begun exploring and lifting just some of it to test it. This oil deposit is like the size of an ocean, right? It's gigantic. And it spreads all across the Eastern Mediterranean, including almost all of Cyprus's waters, not occupied by Turkey. It stretches over just a little bit to Lebanon, over to Israel, and south in the direction of Egypt. The Turks, of course, don't want anybody drilling for oil because they've been cut out of the deal. But it's Israeli money that is leading to the drilling. The Greeks are on their knees. I hate to say, the Greeks are on their knees in front of the Israelis saying, "We love you." They really don't. They love.
Can we have a piece
money.
of this?
Yeah, Israeli money and oil. And the Israelis need friends in the world. They've got Greece and Cyprus, even if it's all fake and just based on oil. But that branch that goes, it's almost like a finger, and it goes south to Gaza. It's Gaza's oil. I mean, were Gaza to be an independent country, it would be Gaza's sovereign oil. None of it goes into the waters of Israel proper.
Right.
That's what the fight is going to be, because the Gazans aren't going to get one red cent of that oil money.
No, that's pretty brutal. And that is the future we're looking at. Yeah. Tariq wants to know what we think about the rising price of gold to record heights this year.
And silver's actually gone up more as a percentage of the price than gold has. People are petrified. They really are.
That's what it is.
These damn mosquitoes. I'm sorry, you guys. People are petrified, and they're running to seek financial shelter. The easiest place is to go to gold. And so that's what so many people are doing. The price has just skyrocketed. In fact, it's at an all-time high right now. It's never been higher than it is now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I totally agree. John, question for you. When will you guys bring back Constantinople?
You know what? I have a shirt, and I'm not wearing it now. I actually pulled it out this morning. I was going to wear it, and I thought, I don't want to make a political statement. But it has the Byzantine two-headed eagle, and it says "Free Constantinople." I was going to wear it today. That's, of course, a joke.
Time for a new crusade.
Yeah.
Although this time, don't kill the locals.
No, which is what the doggone Crusaders did.
They did. They saw people wearing funny hats, and they were like, they must not be ours. They were theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a very serious problem.
It's a major historical fuck up. Should we talk about this? Well, I guess we should talk about. I think the gold question sort of dovetails into the poll about political violence. So, NPR PBS News Marist poll finds that 30% of Americans now view violence as politically necessary to fix the United States. Now, here's the thing: that could seem big, it could seem small, but what it reflects is a major change in just over a year. In April 2024, that was 11 points lower. Now, the main change has been from Democrats. Republicans slightly more than believe that than did a year ago. It's gone from 28 to 31. Democrats has gone from 12 to 28. And of course, this is following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. 77% of Americans overall say political violence is a major worry. To me, John, what is notable about this story is not necessarily that Americans are bloodthirsty and want to kill each other. I don't think that's really true.
No.
I think what is true is Democrats in particularly feel really despairing that they're ever going to have a shot at a bite at the apple ever again, that they're ever going to have any power, that if they ever do, they're going to get the stuff that they lost back from Trump. They think, I think these kind of numbers reflect a society where people feel hopeless, and a sizable percentage of people feel hopeless. And that's never a healthy place to be. I remember, like we talked about this, when Reagan was shot, and I disliked him, but when Reagan was shot, I was upset and sad, and I thought that was bad for the country. When George H.W. Bush was president, I opposed all his policies. I voted for Dukakis. I voted for Bill Clinton. But that said, I didn't feel like the country was in bad hands. Yeah. I thought like it's okay. I don't agree with everything this guy does, but sometimes I do, like when he did the tax increase. And basically it's like a guy I disagree with who basically is trying to do right for the country in his own different way. That's not how people feel right now who are not into Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's not doing anything to make them feel better.
No, I think your assessment is 100% on. I never, I don't mean to overstate it. I don't want people to think I'm a drama queen or anything, but I really genuinely feel or fear for the country right now. The Charlie Kirk thing still has me very upset. Not that I had any love of Charlie Kirk. I didn't, like you, but my God, nobody should have to die for their ideas. It was just wrong.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I understand the desperation that people feel right now. And like you, I can see people who consider themselves to be Democrats saying that they're considering taking up arms just in case everything turns to shit and they have to protect their families and their property. I get that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we've certainly seen it when it was the other way around. I mean, when Obama was president, like a lot of conservatives ran out to buy guns, right? Obama's going to come for our guns. They're going to all be taken away.
Which was silliness.
And so, but I think that's a different kind of paranoia, right? I mean, so, I mean, when the conservatives, go out to buy guns, they're worried that they won't be able to buy guns. They're not really worried that the government's going to come for them personally and that they need the guns to defend themselves from chaos and anarchy.
Right.
But like when Democrats say they need guns, they think that their fellow American citizens are coming to get them.
You're exactly right. That is exactly what it is. Yes.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of each other. I mean, we should be able to, I mean, a liberal from New York should be able to stop for gas in Pennsylvania and see a guy with a giant beard and think, oh, that's funny. Look at that giant ZZ Top guy. But like not be thinking that guy wants to kill me and rape my wife.
You're right. Ted, I lay in bed at night and I watch these cop videos. And usually it's guys, they're called First Amendment auditors. So they'll just stand in front of a store or a police station or a post office and just stand there filming, right? They've got their cameras on a tripod or something like that. And they want people, they call it stress testing the First Amendment. So they want people to come out and challenge them and call the cops. And 9 times out of 10, the cops are like, oh, it's illegal to film, like in public. I'm standing in public on a sidewalk and you're telling me it's illegal to film. Well, the First Amendment says it's perfectly legal to film and you can't do anything about it. Or they'll go into the cop parking lot and just take pictures of all the license plates of the cop cars. And the cops just lose their minds over it.
It freaks them out.
Well, one of the things that I noticed, a pattern that the cops do is they will approach people in open carry states. So imagine this. There's a Burger King and there are 2 ZZ Top looking guys in the Burger King just standing in line. They happen to have M4s, right? Mm-hmm. Privately owned M4s because it's an open carry state.
Sure.
And the cops come. How can I help you today? And the responses are always great. I didn't ask for your help unless you want to get me this burger. Yeah, I'm good. Well, just wondering why you're carrying a gun. Well, it's an open carry state. Am I breaking the law? No. Okay, then the conversation's over. You're dismissed. I love when they say that.
Yeah.
You're dismissed.
That's so great.
But we're getting to the point where there's so much distrust that something terrible could happen, right?
Yes.
If everybody's carrying weapons for their own protection and everybody's on edge and everybody's fearful of the other guy, something terrible could happen. And even though the poll says it's only 30% of Americans that support, not even support or expect violence or whatever the wording is.
May be necessary.
We may get there far more quickly than we realize we will. And that's what frightens me.
Right. I mean, look, full disclosure. I mean, I've always believed that for truly radical reform, you need a revolution, and you can't have a revolution purely nonviolently. That's never going to happen.
That's right.
But, so I guess you put me into the 30%. I have to be included in the 30%. But yeah, it is,
me too, tell you the truth.
But what it says is very dangerous. And it's like, and you're right. It's like it's the tension. You can feel it, like in those videos, those First Amendment audit videos that I watch a lot of too.
Love
we
them.
Must have the same algorithm feeding us up, the dudes, Gen X dudes from the Midwest. But I see those and I'm thinking you can feel the tension is palpable. You think like, these cops are 5 seconds away from popping these dudes. It could happen.
Yes.
And it's terrifying.
Yes.
But I'm glad those guys do it. But
I am too.
And the cops are crazy though.
Service.
They are crazy. I mean, there was, I used to live in East Hampton. And I one time I'm coming back from the beach, driving barefoot. There's a police checkpoint for no apparent reason, broad daylight, right on the main highway. So the cop stops me, and he looks at me and he goes, "You're not wearing shoes." I'm like, "That's correct." And he goes, "That's illegal. Put on your shoes." I go, "No, it's not." And he goes, "It's illegal. I'm telling you, it's illegal." I'm like, "If it's illegal, then write me a summons." And I go, "You can't write me a summons because in the summons section, you're going to have to cite the part of New York code or local East Hampton code that says that I can't have to wear shoes." I go, "Actually, studies have shown that driving barefoot is safer because you can feel the car's vibrations better when you drive barefoot." I like driving barefoot. Yeah. And anyway, he goes, "Oh, you're such a smart ass." I go, "Thank you. Am I free to go?"
Oh, you're one of those guys. I noticed they say a lot in the videos. You're one of those guys. And usually the filmer says, one of those guys who loves the Constitution. Yeah, that would be me. Yes.
Yeah, that's like my favorite. My favorite overheard quote was from my friend Scott Stantis, the cartoonist. Someone hate called him at the Birmingham News, and he said, "I bet you're one of those book readers, aren't you?"
Oh,
God help us all.
oh my God.
Like
Uh,
great, nice country.
oh my God.
Well,
The
we'll have
founding fathers have to be just spinning.
and yes, and by the way, here about Charlie Kirk. No, but by the way, that just the way that the right is reacting to this. I mean, look, I know this what I'm about to say now is kind of silly and maybe and ridiculous, but this was an opportunity this crisis was an opportunity to pull together and just all be able to agree on something, like namely shooting a young man in the prime of his life while he's talking is not cool. But like we can't do that, and like this has to be used as a way to own the libs and and get political advantage. It sucks. I mean, and there's the biggest problem is there's no adult in the room.
No, that's exactly right. There's no adult in the room. And that's what's the scariest thing. For example, did you see a couple of days ago, Trump tweeted a picture of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer coming out of the White House. And he put a big sombrero on Schumer and a big mustache that like covers his whole face. It was just a racist meme. And then he wrote something about Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries being at the White House to fight for health care for illegal immigrants. And then today or yesterday, somebody asked Vice President Vance what he thought about this racist meme. And he said, "Oh, it's not racist. I thought it was pretty funny." Well, if there's nobody in a position of leadership who's willing to take a stand over something that's clearly racist, it was just a cheap shot. It was completely unnecessary. It's offensive to a lot of Americans. And the vice president says, no, I love Donald Trump and everything Donald Trump does. And it wasn't racist. It was funny. Okay, well, why don't we do a meme about your crackhead mother? Huh? You think that's going to be funny too? And maybe your crackhead mother's not going to get Obamacare.
Right.
That wouldn't be funny. I mean, no. I might have to say it's funny because by Vance's standards, it's comedic. But, where's the leadership? Stand up, for heaven's sake.
Well, I mean, look, I have no problem with presidents and vice presidents and other political leaders, cursing and being profane and laughing, yucking it up in private. Yeah. But in the public sphere, they're supposed to be, mature. They're supposed to be, in fact, that's really the biggest job they have, is to be like national daddy, to sort of explain what's what and what's okay and what's not okay. And I mean, look, I think Obama kind of tried most of the time. Joe Biden couldn't do it. And Trump has zero interest. That's not his profit model.
It's not. And Adam Fighter, thank you for the reminder, man. Adam Fighter says I got to chill out, and he's exactly right. I gotta take a step back.
Yeah.
So that I can get on my knees before Donald Trump too.
Good point. And no one will blame you.
No, I hope not.
All right. Well, one more Trump story. So, I mean, it's always Trump. John, actually, I've been meaning to ask you about this. So, when Trump was first elected in 2016, I wrote a column that I think, you look back and you're like, oh, this one, I really had this one right. It's like, and basically I said, this is going to be like Turkmenistan under Turkmenbashi, where everybody's obsessed with every action of the leader. The leader's always up to this and that, always saying and doing weird shit. And everyone's like just in a state of heightened awareness, like a prisoner watching a corrections officer, right? Like, what are they doing? Watching, and that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened to us.
Yeah, it is. Turkmenbashi, I was fascinated by that guy for all the reasons that you've cited. The white cars, all other colors banned.
Yeah.
the giant buildings that just sat empty. It was just fascinating to me that people seem to be cool with all that.
It's
But that's
bizarre.
that's
Yeah,
I got to back off. Adam Fighter's right. I got to back off.
I wrote a piece called "The Glory That Is Turkmenbashi." It was like, I mean, the details. He wanted to create an ice skating lake in the middle of the world's hottest desert. He banned pigeons. He couldn't decide whether facial hair was mandatory or banned. Kept flip-flopping on that all the time. The posters of him all over the country kept changing to send that message. He banned music, then he unbanned music. He banned smoking, which turned out to be a good thing. Yes, just a total wackadoodle. And he personally reviewed every college application.
Yeah, that's
in the country. Yeah, he's a one-man college admissions committee. So the Supreme Court told Trump that he can't fire Lisa Cook, at least not for the time being. Right. So this seems, I'm reading this as I think this is probably going to be permanent. I think the Supreme Court is treading lightly, but I think they've decided that independence of the Federal Reserve Bank is going to be a red line because protecting capitalism is the number one job of the Supreme Court. They're not going to allow presidential prerogatives to extend that far. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, the Supreme Court really is the last line of defense. And Trump has complained vociferously about the lower courts. He hasn't said a whole bunch about the Supreme Court. But I agree with you. They're trying not to provoke, which is probably good. At the same time, the president's trying to upend historical norms, things that every president has governed by, and the Supreme Court is gently telling him to back off. I think that was the impression that I got from this decision, and they did say that it's a temporary hold, a restraining order of sorts. I don't think it's temporary. I think it's going to be permanent, just like you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is sort of like exactly like you said, gentle, like we're going to break the news to him. We're not going to come out like guns blazing like that federal judge who reamed him over the deportations of academics. Right. This is going to be more just sort of like, Donald, we love you, but there's just some things we can't let you do. We're really sorry. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's how I see it.
I see this as a sneak preview. Maybe I'm wrong here on how they're going to rule on tariffs. I think they're going to come back and they're going to say, sorry, Donald, that's a congressional prerogative.
I totally agree. That's another thing. The Constitution specifically says that tariffs are the purview of Congress, not the president. Yeah. The president just simply cannot constitutionally levy tariffs. You just can't.
Right.
But we've got a Republican Party in Congress that sees itself as an adjunct of the White House, and they won't do anything about it.
Right. That's totally how I see it too. Number 30 in the country right now on Rumble. Here, DeProgram.
We did well yesterday, thanks to our wonderful viewers.
Yeah, and thanks for following us to the morning, by the way. We appreciate that. Yeah. Of course, it gives you all day to watch, which is nice. Scary girl. I hate touch screens too. I do. I grew up with the clicky buttons. I like the clicky buttons. You can buy it. You can buy a keyboard that's like an old-fashioned typewriter, like the old-fashioned like Apple IIe keyboards. Like
I didn't know that.
Clickety click. John, I'm going to get you one of those as soon as our first check comes in. I'm buying you one because that's you need that. It's like because you're a pounder.
I am.
We both learned on typewriters.
Yeah, so. I told you I've worn off the A, the S, the D, and the C on my keyboard. I'm looking at right now. They're just blank.
Yeah, I haven't worn mine off that much, but my A is pretty worn. It's pretty worn off.
Oh no, mine you can't even. It's just clear.
Just like that's awesome. So All right, let's talk a little bit about science. And, if people have, by the way, this is a good time if you have, some stuff you want to, your own requests, comments, stuff you want John and I to talk about and address now. So Dialectical Boo says mornings are better. Okay, cool. So we'll see. Good. I mean, it's all subjective. The Europeans are who watch us here, and we have quite a few, are highly appreciative. If you're in Australia, there's just nothing we can do.
Sorry.
You guys are just on the other side of the planet. I used to drive a taxi in New York in the 80s, and I loved just listening to other people, my passengers, because they kind of assumed you were like a Waymo before they invented Waymos. Like taxi drivers hear everything, and people assume that you're not like alive and that you don't listen and that you don't notice anything. Yeah. I remember I had these two guys a guy from two Aussies and an American in the back of my car, all drunk. And so the American guy goes, "So what's it like down there in Australia?" And one of the Aussies goes, "I don't know, what do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, like, what's everything like?" And he goes, "It's like here, but different." I was hoping he'd say, like, we all stand upside down, but, nothing like we all stand on our heads. It's really, it's hard on our wrists. But, okay.
That's actually one of the big things that the flat earthers say.
Oh, really?
The earth has to be flat. Otherwise, everybody in Australia would be upside down.
Right. Obviously. It couldn't just be far.
Right.
Oh, Rebellious Rainbow Unicorn would like to know why you, John Kiriakou, have not finished your PhD. I wonder if this is like, is this a member of your family? Like, John, why haven't you finished your doctorate?
My dad had his PhD in music education. I started my PhD at the University of Virginia in 1990. And what was great was that the CIA was paying for it, which helped me a lot. And then the Gulf War broke out and I had to go to the Middle East. When I got back, we were still creating no-fly zones and stuff like that. And I didn't have time. And then I got assigned to Bahrain, and then life got away from me. We had a son, then we had another son, then I got divorced, then 9/11 happened, then I got married again, I went back overseas, and I just never got around to it. I have a friend who tells me almost every day, you need to go back and get your PhD every day. But now I'm thinking, I'm 60 years old. Like, does it really matter? Tom Drake went and got his PhD. Tom Drake, the NSA whistleblower. He went and got his PhD in his 60s and is very proud.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So,
but he didn't, frankly, I hate to say this, and I don't mean this in a denigrating way at all, because Tom Drake is a great American, but he didn't have a lot going on career-wise, professionally, because he was blacklisted.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. He was blacklisted.
I mean, I think grad school and doctoral school is where you go. When you seriously, like, let's say you have a big lapse in your career, you're having a hard time finding a job, the economy sucks. It's like you opt out and go and, professionalize and get credentialed, and then, let things sort themselves out, and it mixes it up. I mean, I do regret never. My mom always thought I should have gotten my master's at least. I got admitted, but they didn't give me any money. So
that's another thing.
It's expensive. And there's opportunity cost. While you're doing that, you're not working. You're not in Mexico getting eaten by mosquitoes.
When I was last in Athens, I gave a talk at the University of Athens, and one of the professors came up to me afterwards and asked if I had my PhD, and I said no, but I always sort of harbor thoughts of getting it. And he said, well, you should get it here at the University of Athens. He said, they would take a lot of what you've done in life as, academic work.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, well, that's certainly something to think about. And he said, well, if you do, I'll be your PhD advisor. He said, we'll make it fast. We'll make it easy. And I thought, well, that's an idea. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Thanks for asking, though. I'm thinking about it.
I got an offer when I was working at, set that another time. That's like from the life of Ted Rall. I do want to talk about this. Craig D. Vance, another No Kings March, October 18th, for what it's worth. Good tee up. Not much. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with liberal Americans? I mean, like, John, it's October 2nd, right? Donald Trump, great threat to American democracy, blah, blah, blah. Never mind that. A hardcore right-wing Republican. He's been, going hard, right? I think it's fair to say, since January 20th. So here we are. It's been 8+ months. Democrats have been able to basically do 3 rallies. This will be number 3.
Yeah.
Three. I mean, in the Vietnam War, every little shitty town had protesters 365 fucking days a year.
So right.
I mean, I remember seeing, like, in Kettering, Ohio, where I grew up, on like Far Hills Avenue, like sad little anti-war protesters, like half a dozen of them under umbrellas in shitty weather on the median strip, as the cars zoomed by, nobody honking in solidarity because they were all a bunch of conservatives who loved Nixon. And like, where is that spirit? I mean, there's no resistance at all.
No.
I mean, this is maybe that's the hopelessness thing about the 30% of the Americans think. I think we gave up on protests. Honestly, I think the Iraq War was the last hurrah of real protest. People thought if we
global, I agree with you. And another thing too is, I really believed that. Well, no, I should. I really do have to watch what I say. But anyway, I agree with you. It's been distressing to me that Americans just don't take to the streets. And when they do, like say during the BLM period, it's newsworthy. It's a big deal. And
the only reason, John, during BLM was because there was a lockdown.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget this one guy. He's one guy, right? So N of 1. But I was parking my car near a BLM protest. They were happening daily in Manhattan. And I said, I don't remember, I was talking to a dude walking by, and he goes, "No Mets game today. This is the only game in town." And like that, and that's true, right? I mean, literally when I bring this up with my lefty friends, they say, "Well, people have to work." I'm like, people have to, if you have a revolution, you don't go to work. Like Tahrir Square, they didn't go to work, like work is off. It's like time to overthrow the government. I mean, I just don't understand this mentality.
There was a wonderful episode of Adam 12 that I was watching the other day for the billionth time. And it was about protests at the local college, LAU, which doesn't exist. And in one scene, these rabble-rousers go up to a friendly professor and they say, "Are you going to be at the community seminar?" And she said, "I don't know. What's it going to be about?" And he said, "We'll decide that when we get there. It's going to be followed up by a protest." "Oh, what are we protesting?" And he says, "Everything." It was just there are protests every day because that's what you do. You're in college, you take to the streets, you demand change. Can you imagine? I mean, that's laughable now.
No.
Laughable. Nobody would do that.
No.
Nobody does do that.
And look, Rebellious Rainbow Unicorn says we protest online instead. And that's true. But, it's like during the pandemic, the cartoonists had a virtual convention, and several of them called me and say, "Are you going?" I said, "I'm virtually interested in going." And it's like, that's exactly how I feel about this. I mean, it's like online doesn't exist. It's not real. No. And it does not scare the powers that be. They're like, "Oh, you guys go cosplay online and pretend to care about the future of your country. What a bunch of wusses." Got to talk this science story. Researchers have now published the biggest analysis ever. It's like a super study, a study of studies, over 1,000 mammalian and bird species. And they basically found like why females live longer. In almost every species, females live longer than males. Now, for human beings, we've always assumed that that's because men have testosterone, so they drive faster, more recklessly, more dangerously, that they go to wars and get killed there, that they work in more dangerous occupations where they can fall into the vat of, burning steel or, whatever. But now it turns out that in addition, and all those things are true, but females outlive males globally in all cultures. So the new theory, and I love this, so it's called heterogenic sex vulnerability hypothesis is what this is. And the heterogenic sex vulnerability hypothesis is really elegantly simple. It says that chicks have 2 X chromosomes, dudes have an X and a Y. That's normal. There are variants and mutations and all that. Well, and because women have they have more chances to buffer harmful mutations. The extra X chromosome serves as like a backup, but males have like a reversed system, which means that they don't have genetic redundancies that protect them. So they are more vulnerable to diseases and bad mutations.
That is simple, and it does make sense.
Yeah.
And they're filtering out things like men dying early because of war, because of drugs. It's all science.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of like the kind of thing that could have broken when we were kids, and there was just a very early and primitive understanding of genetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
My favorite genetic story is from the UK in the 1950s. The only thing that they could test for was paternity and maternity. The only thing that they knew about DNA at that point. Mm-hmm. And they figured that the test for maternity was reliable, but the test for paternity just was unreliable. And then they realized actually it worked fine. So it turned out a lot of people who went away to war and came back, and they had kids who were not really theirs.
Oh, man.
Oops.
Well, fog of war.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Car 52 with silly fun says to Cleese 02. Oh, okay. So Miss Lee 145 is saying, what do we think about what's been going on in Nigeria, and why is the media pretending like it's not happening, John?
There's actually a lot going on in Nigeria. I think what we're talking about here is these attacks on Christians. Mm-hmm. Nigeria has a serious separatist problem and a serious problem with organizations that are associated with ISIS or with the branch of Al Qaeda that we see in the Sahel. But there have been many attacks on Christian schools, on churches, even on orphanages that have resulted in the deaths of thousands of people. Just a few weeks ago, there was a church where people had taken refuge from one of these groups, and they just went in and set the place on fire and burned everybody up inside. Yeah. I don't know why we're not talking about that in the West. You think that would be tailor-made for right-leaning American media, for example. And
on the far right, they mention this sometimes. Yeah. Like on OAN and stuff like that.
Right. On OAN, you'll see it in Breitbart once in a while.
Yeah. But mainstream Fox News doesn't even touch it.
No.
And it is weird. I mean, sometimes you'll look at an issue and you'll be like, as a lefty, I'll be like, it is weird that like these things aren't being covered. And I don't know that, like, honestly, I don't see why attacks on Christians should be something that only right wingers care about.
That's right.
I mean, lefties should care about that too.
Yeah.
But religious freedom is super important. I got to tell you, the discomfort, I think, probably on the left comes from like, these are quote unquote traditional Black people killing other people. And we don't like to think that that happens. And it's icky, and it's like not simple. It's not like the Black person as victim all the time. And so, whenever there's a narrative that makes liberals a little uncomfortable, they just punt.
Yeah, they do. That's true. That's true. They punt. And we should be outraged anytime something like that happens. We should be outraged when Christians are murdered just because they're Christians, just like we should be appalled when Muslims are murdered because they're Muslims, or Jews just because they're Jews. These people in Manchester, they're just going to temple, and they're murdered just because they're Jews. It's just never acceptable.
No. I mean, exactly. I mean, it's like, I think it's hard for the left in general to get behind victims who are targeted because of their religion, but it ought not to be.
No.
It should be, the left should be very simple. It should be like, we care about people.
Yeah, that's it.
Period.
It's as simple as that. Yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately. Yeah. So, it's a little bit depressing there. Well, I think we're going to get ready to wrap it up. Just a little, I'm going to pop in Robbie so that he could explain the situation that we're doing. And I will. There's Robbie.
Howdy, y'all. Hey, here's Robbie. All right. So for those of you on Rumble, there's nothing that you have to do. Thank you for being there. What John and Ted and I and Manila and some other people are working on doing, we're actually working on building an actual network. So what, kind of like how you have OAN or Fox News or CNN, when one show ends, a new one will start. That's what we're working on building. So on Rumble, what's going to happen is that you'll be migrated over seamlessly, hopefully, to the next show. Nothing you have to do on your end. And the reason for that is one, Rumble pays more. People got bills, and so Rumble helps pay those. Also, Rumble does not censor us. And speaking about Rumble, all 5 of John's episodes are now up for his life story. Ted's going to start dropping
it's
today.
So good too.
Oh, it's awesome. Fun. And so if you're over there on YouTube, I encourage you, please go to the TMI show. Ted will be hosting over there with Manila Chan. So if you're on Rumble though, just sit tight. I will work the producer magic here on the back end. There's nothing you have to do.
There's a little bit of a timer issue because, in the same way we have the timer to sync up all the streams here at the beginning of Deprogram, TMI show does the same thing. We're trying to make that more seamless and have that start exactly at like 9:55 Eastern time. So it'll literally go, but just bear with it. You might get a minute or 2 or 3.
Right now, making this work with duct tape and prayers. So
yeah, I mean, we're on day 2 of it, and it's going pretty well. TMI show with me and Manila Chan coming up at 10 a.m. Here on Deprogram, we will be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, Friday, October 3rd. John, have a great day out there in paradise. Stay away from the mosquitoes. Okay,
great.
bye.
Good to see everybody.
Ciao.